Good morning, everyone, and welcome to NSIN Starts 5G pitch competition. First of all, I just want to thank our partners at Verizon Media for the phenomenal footage they helped put together for this event. I get the opportunity to MC this morning's event. My name is Jesse Geip. I am the Pacific South Regional Director of the National Security Innovation Network. And I'm thrilled to say that we were able to partner on this event with a great group of DoD organizations to make this possible, starting with the Naval X SoCal Tech Bridge, NIWC Pacific, and our Marine Corps and Navy partners. And really, the reason that we are doing this event today as NSIN is to try to identify new startups that can help solve the military's 5G challenges. The United States military, like all other parts of the economy, are going to be transformed by what 5G brings to bear, both in the United States on bases, but also for the Marine Corps, the Navy, and all services as they look at deploying and completing complex missions all around the world. And so today, we've been able to partner to put together a really exciting event for you all, where we'll be showcasing 10 phenomenal startups who competed from across the country and are here today to pitch for $50,000 each and the opportunity to demonstrate their technology live on a 5G living lab that was developed at Marine Corps Air Station Miramar right here in San Diego with the support of Verizon. And so just to give you a little bit of the lay of the land for how today is going to run, and then we will get going here. The morning session consists of a series of speakers and a key panel in which we'll be going over some of the Navy's 5G strategy and giving you an inside look into the 5G Living Lab, the partnerships that made it possible, and the technologies that are being deployed, developed, and tested in that phenomenal space. Additionally, this afternoon, we will kick off the afternoon session with the Managing Director of National Security Innovation Network, Morgan Plummer, who will give you a deeper overview of our organization and how we work with DoD customers to help them solve complex problems using novel solutions like the pitch competition that we are running today. And then we get to jump right into 10 pitches from our phenomenal startups. And at the end of the day today, we will be selecting our 4 winners. And so you'll hopefully be with us throughout the day for that entire event. We will have a lunch break from 12 to 12:40, give everyone a chance to breathe before we jump into the pitches. So with that, I would like to go ahead and introduce our first speaker of the day. And it's a real privilege to introduce Congressman Scott Peters from the 52nd Congressional District here in San Diego. Congressman Scott Peters has been a longtime friend of mine personally, but has been a big champion of the Navy and the Marine Corps within the region for his entire time in Congress. Formerly a member of the HASC, and now currently on the Energy and Commerce Committee. Congressman Peter was personally instrumental in making sure that the Navy and the Marine Corps got the funding that they needed to establish the 5G Living Lab at Mcas Miramar. And he continues to be a champion for our regional economy and for the Navy and the Marine Corps. And so with that, please allow me to introduce Congressman Scott Peters, our first speaker of today, with a message for us all about this partnership. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Congressman Scott Peters, and I represent San Diego, Poway, and Coronado in the United States House of Representatives, and it's a pleasure to be here with all of you today. San Diego is exactly the right place for an event that highlights the growing opportunities for 5G and the chance to collaborate with our Navy and Marine Corps. San Diego has the largest concentration of U.S. military service members globally, with 7 military bases in my district alone, and over 110,000 uniformed military personnel assigned to a variety of commands and units in our entire area. And it's also home to some of the most innovative companies in the world, including Qualcomm, one of our region's largest employers. Qualcomm invented the foundational technologies for 5G and is working to accelerate 5G deployment across the country. I'm sure you've all heard of Qualcomm, but you may not be aware of why their dual-use technology is so promising. Irwin Jacobs, the founder of Qualcomm, developed Code Division Multiple Access Technology, or CDMA, which is a channel access method used by various radio communications technologies. This core innovation spurred the creation of hundreds of companies and thousands of jobs and has transformed the telecommunications industry. The interplay among science, technology, and the military has always been significant, but as 5G networks begin to deploy more widely for commercial use, the opportunities to use 5G to advance our national security are boundless. The Department of Defense put it this way, quote, "The shift from 4G to 5G will drastically impact the future of global communication networks and fundamentally change the environment in which DoD operates. The enhanced infrastructure 5G provides will improve connectivity and speed while reducing latency, critical components that will boost accuracy, rapid response, adaptability, and coordination. These capabilities within the military apparatus are absolutely critical to our national defense. The deployment of these technologies is widespread in Asia, driving up the largest market forces. That's why it's imperative for the US government to team up with private industry to support the deployment of trusted technologies and infrastructure. Understanding the important relationship between domestically produced, cutting-edge technology and national security is why I helped secure congressional funding to establish the 5G Learning Lab powered by Verizon and Mcas Miramar. Earlier this month, I toured energy, communications, and logistic facilities at Mcas Miramar, including the 5G Learning Lab, where the Marines are doing excellent work to drive innovation and maximize emergency energy preparedness with their microgrid. This investment and partnership between the Marine Corps and Verizon provides a unique opportunity for the military to gain insights and advantages from a new 5G network. It also demonstrates why public-private partnerships are vital to our nation's continued success as a global leader in innovation. I want to thank the National Security Innovation Network, Naval X, Mcas Miramar, and NAVWAR for making this event possible. And to all the companies pitching later this afternoon, I wish you the best of luck. To the investors and companies joining the event today in the audience, I encourage you to consider how your technology and experience can be leveraged to support our men and women who serve. I look forward to meeting again in person. I really do, after we defeat COVID, and to learn about the ideas that come out of this virtual gathering today. So thank you, be well, and be safe. God bless our troops, and God bless our country.
Thank you, Congressman Peters. And again, thank you for your partnership with our Navy and Marine Corps throughout the San Diego region and for your comments today. So for our next speaker, we have Assistant Secretary of the Navy, James Hondo Gertz, who will be providing some comments and will be interviewed by, for those of you who are Naval X fans, Matt Mohawk Denny. And so we'll have a message coming on from him in just a sec. But very quickly, I'm sure many of you are familiar with the Assistant Secretary's prestigious record, but I want to just highlight a few things for those of you who may not be familiar with the Assistant Secretary's role and some of his responsibilities. He was appointed in November of 2017, and as the Assistant Secretary for Research, Development, and Acquisitions, Mr. Gertz has oversight of an annual budget of excess of $100 billion and is responsible for equipping and supporting all of the key technologies that impact our Navy sailors and our Marine Corps. And in his role, he has continued to push for new and innovative ways to engage non-traditional defense companies in the national security marketplace. So I think we're very thrilled to have him here today with us as a partner, because what he is doing within the Navy and the Marine Corps to make it a marketplace that attracts more technology, especially technology, commercial technology like that is being developed currently in the 5G space, is exactly, I think, what we need in our military and within our national security content in order to continue to compete across the globe. So with that, please allow me to introduce Secretary Gertz and Matt Mohawk Denny to provide some additional comments about the Navy's interest in 5G and the importance of events like this. Thank you.
All right, what's going on, everyone? Mohawk Matt here from Naval X. Super excited to have a chat with the one and only Secretary Jim Hondo Gertz. What's up, sir?
What's up there, Mohawk Matt?
Oh, you know, taking over the world, trying to find ways to make 5G into my everyday life.
Make it into your Mohawk. For the first 5G Mohawk.
Let's do it. Those of you pitching today, you heard it first right there. So before we start, sir, I want to kind of intro with this video, kind of set the playing field for us of what 5G and my knowledge of it.
All right, rock on, Matt.
Here we go.
Welcome to 4G. Don't touch my hair,
Okay,
man.
all right. This is the new version. This is the 5G.
No, now it's 4G.
It's just 5G. So
Okay, all right.
now it's 5G.
Go. This is 5G, I think.
It's a 5G.
What you talking about?
Just a 5G. Just
I'm
say a
getting
5. Just
pretty
say
damn
5G.
All aboard the 5G train. How many bloody G's are there?
I'll take it from here.
Okay.
All right, we're gonna lose Ozzy. Bring in the new one.
Marker.
Ozzy's in the background, guys.
What?
He's in the background.
Is this the way out?
It's Bieber, 6G fever.
What's a 6G?
What the f***'s a Bieber?
Well, that's about the whole knowledge of 5G that I've got. Hopefully you know more about it than I do, sir.
Well, I want to know how many people out there know who Ozzy is. So, that's a little problem with the 5G versus not. It's a new thing coming. Some of us old dinosaurs here who know Ozzy may not know why 5G is so important.
They also may not know who Justin Bieber is either.
Yeah, that might be a plus.
That's a great point. Let's start with that, sir. What is the importance of 5G-enabled technology?
Hey, why are we so interested in 5G? It's going to be a thing that fuels us going forward. It allows us to move data around. It allows us to connect things. It allows us to move kind of really at network speed. And so, an important technology like that, we don't want to be the ones behind on that. We want to be the ones capturing that as early and as capable as possible.
Fantastic. And this event's coming from the 5G Living Lab, and this is kind of a partnership with the Naval Act SoCal Tech Bridge and the National Security Innovation Network. To you, when you set up the tech bridges, what was the importance of that collaboration?
Yeah, so this is actually a real awesome kind of example of abundance thinking, right? We have the Marine Corps base here at Miramar, first DoD base that stood up 5G. We have the SoCal Tech Bridge here. Tech Bridge is there to bring in new folks into our ecosystem, folks we may not have been able to work before. If you're a new person out there that's never worked with DoD, we are interested in you because we're not interested in just, keeping legacy providers around. We're looking for the best ideas, the things we can give our Marines and sailors as quickly as possible so they've got the edge. And so Tech Bridge helps kind of bring this mosh pit together, bang everybody around, and out of it will come, I think, some really new and creative ideas.
That's fantastic. It's really exciting to see the pitches that come today for sure. Is there an innovation strategy for 5G in the Navy and Marine Corps right now?
Yeah, there is, but more than just, I would say, a technology strategy. Our strategy of getting everybody together to go tackle a hard problem, I think you're seeing that on display right now. So putting the end users, folks who are going to use the technology to do something amazing with it, putting creative folks in a room who have got great ideas, and then leveraging the power of the Navy and Marine Corps to help fund those ideas and bring them to life. And so, my expectation for everybody out there is be humble and bold, right? Be humble that you may not have all the answers, and there's probably folks in the room that have answers, and then be bold about taking those opportunities, getting them out there, test them out, listen to the providers, listen to the technologists, listen to the end operators, and I think we do all that, and magic's going to happen.
Fantastic. And you talked about not just using the legacy. A lot of the audience today is startups. How important is the startup community to what we're doing in the Navy and Marine Corps?
Hey, you guys are awesome, and thanks for taking a chance on us. My goal is to allow the best ideas to come to the top as fast as possible, and not let the fact that you may be new to the DoD be a downer or a buzzkill for getting you guys involved with us. We have got some really, really challenging problems. We've got awesome Marines and sailors that want to use this new technology. And our goal is to give you the opportunity to bring that to bear, get your ideas out there. And if they're the top ones, we want to fund them and get them into play.
Excellent, sir. Any closing remarks for the teams going out today?
Hey, rock on, be bold, come up with those ideas, and let's get them going.
Fantastic. Thank you, sir. Appreciate your time.
All right, big man, hang in there.
All right, will do. See
Right
you,
here.
everyone.
Thank you, Assistant Secretary Gertz and Matt, for that. We appreciate your support, and we appreciate all that you're doing on behalf of the Navy and the Marine Corps team to continue to find innovative ways for us to partner with defense and commercial companies looking to solve hard problems. So now I would like to bring in our next two speakers who are coming to us from Verizon. And before I introduce them both, I just want to say that you'll hear more about the partnership that the Marine Corps has established through a creative research agreement called a CRADA with Verizon to establish the 5G Living Lab during our panel and some of our follow-on conversations here in a minute. But just want to, again, thank Verizon for the partnership they've had with us during the course of this event. They have been an excellent collaborator with us, and I think it's a great example of when you can align around mutual interest of what you can achieve in a short period of time. So I want to thank the entire Verizon team for all their support in today's event. And with that, I get to introduce Andreas Orlando, the president of Verizon Public Sector, and Junaid Islam, the director of Verizon Public Sector, to provide some comments about the future of 5G, some of the exciting partnerships that they've established with the Marine Corps here in San Diego, and some of the things that they're looking at for the future as Verizon continues to push ahead with 5G rollout across the country. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Andreas Orlando for our next comments. Thanks so much.
Hello, everyone. My name is Andreas Orlando. I lead Verizon's Public Sector Business Group, including our DoD practice. It's a real pleasure to join you today to celebrate the 5G Pitch Day. I'm a former Naval Intelligence officer myself. It gives me tremendous pride to work with the team at Miramar and leadership from the Marine Corps, the Navy, and the DoD to bring next generation 5G technology and innovation to the military and to bases, including through today's 5G Pitch Day. Verizon, as many of you know, has partnered with the military for decades. We're committed to serving the men and women in uniform, providing the critical networks, platforms, and solutions they need to execute successfully on their missions. Marine Corps Air Station Miramar is an ideal example of that partnership. Way back in 2018, we and the leadership of the Marine Corps and Miramar had a vision for how 5G could help support future strategic initiatives. Just this past July, we and Miramar announced the first 5G ultra-wideband deployment on a U.S. military base. And really, the vision here is for Miramar to serve as a 5G living lab where we can collaborate between the Department of Defense and commercial partners to deliver on cutting-edge solutions for our men and women in uniform. I'm excited that winners of the Pitch Day will have a chance to pilot their technology in that living lab that we've built together with Marine Corps Air Station Miramar. Just to share with you, we are building 5G across the country, including in a number of military bases. Just down the road, for example, in San Diego, we're also working with naval bases on Coronado to lay the foundation for 5G there ultimately. We're also working with other national security agencies and armed forces agencies to deliver on 5G, including the Department of Energy at the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, with the Veterans Administration in Palo Alto to bring 5G to its hospital. And we're only really getting started. We realize just how important reliable communication is to national security. But make no mistake about it, this is more than business for Verizon. It's who we are as a company. It's who our employees are. We employ more than 10,000 former service members. We were named the #1 military-friendly company by militaryfriendly.com for the third straight year. Our men and women who work for Verizon are exceedingly proud to serve the men and women of the armed forces, day in and day out. As I close, I want to thank Congressman Peters, Assistant Secretary Gertz, NSIN Managing Director Plummer, Lieutenant Colonel Newell, and everyone who had a hand in today's event. I wish I could be there in person, but we're proud to work with you as we continue to deliver groundbreaking technology in support of our armed forces. Thank you again for having me. Have a great event and have a great day.
Hi, everybody. My name is Junaid Islam. I'm the Director of Public Sector Solutions here at Verizon. And thank you for letting us be a part of this exciting event. We are basically unveiling a next generation 5G network that's going to be used for application development here in San Diego. And it is truly exciting. Let me, from many dimensions, but certainly a personal perspective, I've been involved in secure communications 30 years now and have developed a lot of protocols that are used by the Department of Defense. Let me give you a personal perspective. 25 years ago, I worked on something called MLPP, which is used in weapons control system. I did not actually have a weapons control system. What I did is write the algorithm on a piece of paper, which was coded by someone else, who then shipped the box to yet somebody else at MDA, and they would do the testing, and that's how we did our work. 10 years after that, I worked on net-centric warfare. A little bit better. We did not actually have a tactical network. We had laptops in Reston, and we used to move these laptops around pretending that they were helicopters and plug Ethernet cables in and out to simulate mobile IPv6 fast handoff. What you have today, is orders of magnitude so far beyond anything I ever worked with. It's kind of magical. You have a state-of-the-art 5G network with features like network slicing, mobile edge compute, and a zero trust architecture pulling it all together. And the things we can do now, we could have never even imagined it. One of the big benefits of the technology you have, the toolkit you have, is you can actually create multiple networks out of one in software. So you could have a network using network slicing just for autonomous vehicles, then a separate one for sensors, then a separate one that you might be using for advanced imaging. Each network will have its own IPv4, IPv6 addressing. Each network will have its own identity scheme, so the different sensors have different names. And when the traffic gets to the MEC node, you can reroute it using policy routing anywhere, whether it's locally to a server or remotely to a cloud. 5G is truly magical, just because for the first time, from a single network, we can create different networks for different application purposes. As soon as this COVID thing is over, I look forward to meeting all of you in person and working with you and really creating the next generation and tactical networks for national security. Thanks again for your time.
Well, thank you, Andreas, and thank you, Junaid. We really appreciate Verizon's support and certainly excited by the partnership that you've established here at Mcas Miramar. And thank you for being such a great partner to us during this event. So now I get to introduce Lieutenant Colonel Brandon Newell with the U.S. Marine Corps, who has been spearheading this project with the National Security Innovation Network. Lieutenant Colonel Newell is the director of the Naval X SoCal Tech Bridge and has been our key partner in executing this entire event, and is also the brainchild behind the 5G Living Lab, and will be with us for the next few discussions, give us more detail into the Navy's specific 5G strategy and sort of the origin story of the Living Lab, as well as a deeper discussion with some of the technology partners who are already deploying at that Living Lab and what's to come for our 10 pitching companies and some of what they're going to be able to do within that context. So with that, I'd like to introduce Lieutenant Colonel Brandon Newell, the director of the SoCal Tech Bridge and a good friend of mine. Lieutenant Colonel Newell, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Jesse. It's an absolute pleasure to host this event with you. NSIN has been a great partner in putting this event on and really unlocking the opportunity for us to better understand 5G enabled technology into the future. You know, we at the Marine Corps and Navy made quite a lot of press in July when we came out and said that we had turned on the first 5G node on any military installation. And that was part of our 5G Living Lab that we had been ideating towards, building towards for 2 years. And we finally turned that on in July, and we continue to grow that. So the 5G Living Lab is really a live 5G and 4G network on Mcas Miramar in the San Diego region. Mcas Miramar is home to about 12,000 Marines and government civilians. It is the primary West Coast hub of the air element, what we call the Marine Air Wing for the Marine Corps. And it's because of its proximity to San Diego and on the West Coast, it has been a great location for how we better understand emerging technology across the Marine Corps and Navy. We have a program that's called Installation Next, which is meant to be the smart cities of bases, where we have areas like protection and mobility and resilience, where we're trying to unlock the opportunity to change how we see and how we create installations into the future, just as your cities across the country are doing today. So this 5G Living Lab is actually a great, probably the best example we have of using our installations as a location to test and pilot, partner with industry for collaboration. So we first started on this route in 2017, whenever we created the Autonomous Vehicle Proving Grounds here at Miramar. At that time, Qualcomm, who you heard from Congressman Peters earlier, is a vital and great player to the region and to 5G, was a partner in what we were doing through a collaborative research and development agreement, where they were leveraging our proving grounds to do their own testing, developmental testing, as they were moving to market for connected vehicles, how they were shaping the industry, the OEMs of the world, from the Fords and the Chevys and on in the auto industry. As that market was being disrupted, Qualcomm really had to lean into how they were developing and these connected vehicle capabilities for the 5G future, and starting with 4G. Through that relationship, we were able to receive market forecasting and developmental insights into a true market maker in the industry commercial space. So with that, we knew that 5G was going to be an incredible disruptor to the auto industry and on the pathway to autonomous and connected vehicles. But we also started to see that it would be a disruptor to so many other areas. So then in 2018, as we knew that we were very interested in creating opportunities to explore 5G, the city of San Diego, who we have an MOU, Memorandum of Understanding with, to work on smart city projects together, sent Verizon over to us to meet. City of San Diego and Verizon had been working on a plan to roll out 5G for the city and the region. And the city knew our interest in really pushing the envelope. And so with that, Verizon sat down with us, I want to say a little over 2 years ago. What we saw is that we had a common vision that 5G was a real disruptor into so many industries, on the commercial space. And we recognized in the Marine Corps and Navy that we needed to find a way to partner with that disruption so that we could effectively, understand what capabilities would be disrupted, what markets would be disrupted, and how to write effective requirements to that. So we feel that the industry is moving so fast, the pace of technology is moving so fast, that we have to change how we engage with industry so that we better understand how those disruptions are coming and not be caught flat-footed. And that is the heart and the spirit of how we have set up this 5G Living Lab. So in 2018, we started working with Verizon to understand what markets they saw in the future being disrupted. We then took those markets and that understanding back into our needs. As I mentioned, the Installation Next gaps that we have for bases. So we then started to create a vision of a 5G Living Lab that was all about the 5G enabled technology, not just a network, not just a waveform, but really what is that network supporting? And so that we can look at the network from the outside in, not from just the inside out. And so with that, we built a vision around 4 technology areas on the 5G Living Lab: around energy communications, around connected vehicles, as I mentioned earlier, around drones, We believe the future of drones is not just an RF radio frequency signal, but it is a cellular connectivity to drones. And then finally, what we call the digital fortress, which is our vision of the future for protection of bases. We've done a great job in the military of building physical fortresses, gates representing moats around our installations. Well, we believe the future is to complement that physical fortress with a digital fortress enabled by cellular technology in many ways. And you'll hear more about that as we get into our panel later with a couple companies. What I'd like to say now is that the 5G Living Lab and that vision of how we were going to explore these 4 areas was instrumental into building the momentum we needed throughout the federal government to move forward with this lab. As was mentioned earlier, Congressman Peters was a champion of that vision, and just the power of public-private partnerships on a military installation like this could unlock. And so we signed a collaborative research and development agreement, again, a CRADA, with Verizon. It's a 4-year agreement that we are sitting at the same table, not across distant ends of a contract, but actually a collaborative partners as to what a 5G Living Lab and what a 5G network does on a base. Congressman Peters was a champion of this vision and was instrumental in the 2020 appropriations bill and $5 million coming out of that bill to support not the establishment of the Verizon network, that was covered by Verizon, but the piloting that I'm highlighting now. Really the money we need to pilot, prototype, and then develop requirements off of what we learn. So to that end, we have now set up 7 different pilots that we have of prototypes that are coming on the 5G Living Lab over this fiscal year. The first of which we turned on just a few weeks ago with a company called Andro, who does security for counter intrusion. You'll hear more from them on our panel later. Another is Robotic Research on our panel later, who does connected vehicle work, unmanned systems. And so you'll hear more from them as to what we're doing together. This pitch day represents another of our pilots. We wanted an opportunity to not just deal with our strategic partners, but also deal with a crowdsourcing opportunity, if you will, as to how we can understand the network, the growth of the network, and the enabled technology on that network. And so you heard earlier about the problem statements that we created. Now, all of this is just a science project unless we're actually feeding a large program across the Department of Defense and their requirements development into the future of what 5G should do on bases and do on the battlefield. And to that end, we invited Joe Snively, representing the Department of the Navy, CIO, to join us today in talking about some of the larger programs that the Department of Defense and the Department of Navy is leading across the country for 5G, and what they at the Don CIO are interested in exploring and closing our knowledge gaps. Everything we do is meant to close both a technology knowledge gap, but then also a concept of employment knowledge gap. And we unlock these opportunities to bring industry in as a partner to understand that better. And so with that, I wanted to welcome Joe Snively. How are you, Joe?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me here, Brandon. This is really a critical moment for the entire Department of Defense and the federal government and the Department of Navy. 5G is different. I've been in the government for about 17 years, and a lot of those years have been spent prototyping and developing communication systems and writing software. And a lot of it was legacy stuff. And through the years, I've seen different sort of efforts that tried to push innovation to move faster. And I've seen them stall, and I'm seeing them get frustrated. And I'll tell you that this effort to push 5G feels significantly different than what I have experienced in the past. And for a couple of big reasons. You already mentioned the fact that we're running some experiments that are sponsored by the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense in Research and Engineering. The Department of Defense put together a portfolio and is continuing to put together a larger and larger portfolio every year with a lot of projects aimed at exploring the technologies and use cases for 5G, and doing it with such a significant thrust that we really break a lot of ground very quickly that would not have happened if it had just been left up to the labs to do innovation. But now that we have that top cover, in essence, we really have a lot more room and a lot more latitude to experiment with the concept of employment, the concept of operations. How does this technology actually make an improvement to the warfighter or to the person in a warehouse to make their life better, to improve fleet readiness and to improve logistics? So I did want to mention a few things to the audience that, especially this audience, that the bidirectional industry engagement like this that we're having at this scale is truly critical. You know, our engineers and scientists that are a part of our 5G community of practice, we collectively have decades of experience with software-defined networks, software-defined radios, cloud technologies, orchestration. And so for us, kind of climbing up that 5G learning curve has been a little bit easier, but still, with the absolute gigantic ecosystem that 5G is, everything from the ITU's requirements to the 3GPP specifications. I think there's over 1,200 specifications. And with all of the technologies that are coming out of that and evolving at such a fast pace, there's no way for us to stay abreast of what's going on and where the best ideas are coming from without this bidirectional engagement. So as we continue to work together through these living labs and through the experiments that are sponsored by OUSD R&E, we are going to be keeping a keen eye and taking lots of notes about where little individual technologies and use cases can really bring an impact to the warfighter. And the bidirectional element of that, the other way towards you, is that we want to send a much stronger and clearer demand signal. We don't want to just say we want to do good things. We want to send a really clear signal as to what it is that we're interested in, because we think that in part that will perhaps inform the way you invest in your own R&D and the types of standards and specifications where you want to make a contribution, because you can't write to all of them. You have to pick and choose the ones that are going to have the most impact. So we want to be a part of that conversation. And luckily, in the Department of Navy, we have the Department of Navy Chief Information Officer, Mr. Aaron Weiss, and the Chief Digital and Innovation Officer, Mr. Mike Galbraith, that have been, you know, at the forefront of this, saying we need to go faster, we need to do this more, we need to ensure the success of each one of these experiments and ensure the impact long term, so that we're getting good prototypes that have an impact on site, but we're also evolving our strategy and our requirements all along the whole way, so then we can do something at scale when we're done with these experiments at the individual prototype level. So I mean, what these experiments mean to us is just incredible. For one, they're allowing us to learn how to build, how to operate, and how to defend these 5G systems, which we've never had. We don't have a canned certification path to get these, you know, on a DOTA network. So allowing us to not only experiment with how to build them and operate them, but get them into a certification path is absolutely critical to doing anything at scale. And they really help us to understand the affordability and
that's
the scalability.
great, Joe.
Thank you.
So Joe, you know, we're very excited to have you here and trying to unpack this, as you mentioned, a very large ecosystem. There's also a very large effort by Office of Secretary of Defense to unlock this ecosystem. Many of us are trying to figure out what some of this means and how it's linked together, and you know, how the different services and the 12 different bases. So I wanted to start you first on the first question of, I think a week and a half ago, it came out in the media that the first $600 million of the OUSD program was being awarded to certain winners across what we call Tranche 1. So that's 5 of the 12 bases. You know, from the Department of the Navy's perspective, can you really help us understand what does that mean? And where is that Tranche 1, you know, program going?
Oh, great question. So that portfolio of programs under OSD started out, like you said, with 4 Tranche 1 programs. They've announced the identification of 7 others, including in one at Nellis Air Force Base, which makes a total of 12. In Tranche 1, though, the Navy got one 5G experiment, the Marine Corps got one 5G experiment, Air Force and Army also got one. The two in the Navy and the Marine Corps are focused on logistics at warehouses for shipment and for vehicles separately. They're looking at different ways, different technological means for building those warehouses and automating logistics so that we can go from having highly manual processes where there's a lot of room for human error. There's not a lot of visibility into your inventory, what's coming, what's going, and moving that to something that's more digitized and then more automated and then finally more orchestrated so that you have dramatically more logistics capability and fleet readiness. The experiment at Albany, for example, 25% of all the Marine Corps material comes through that one warehouse or through that one base. So if we can make an impact there, we have made an immediate impact to the warfighter.
Joe, I thought we'd let's explore that smart warehouse a little bit. I'm gonna change up our question number 2 on you. You know, here at Miramar, we actually have our most critical warehouse that we use, that Marine Air Logistics Squadrons use. You know, this building was built in 1954. That is not uncommon as we look across all of the services and our installations that we have, you know, old legacy, you know, brick and mortar. Now, you know, with these efforts at Naval Base San Diego and Marine Corps Logistics Base Albany, really pushing the envelope of what smart warehouses, you know, what would you say to the rest of the services as to how the experimentation and the prototyping of those two bases will help transition to the rest of us?
That's a wonderful point, and it's very nuanced because transition can take multiple paths. The nominal path is that your prototype is successful and you go into sustainment and you continue to evolve it and use it. Another transition path is that you find so much value out of that prototype that you Control C, Control V that prototype into other warehouses. And then you have your entire logistics chain is more automated and more orchestrated. And then finally, you might find that there are other applications of that technology into something that's not specifically logistics oriented, or you can build on that to say, hey, well, if we can automate what goes on in a warehouse, what about in a depot? Or what about going from the warehouse onto the ship? What else can we continue to automate once that functional test bed is there, once our systems are integrated and we have total visibility into our assets and where they are? So I think that there's a transition path for the test bed itself into one or multiple that you can get at scale. And then there's further transition and evolution of that test bed into new use cases.
Oh, that's great, Joe. You know, as I described what the 5G Living Lab was doing and the 4 pillars of exploration, you didn't hear me talk about a warehouse. But what people might not recognize is as we look at connected vehicles, and again, you'll hear more about this on our panel later, we believe that connected vehicles, you know, the next step in unmanned from autonomous to connected is really the early entry of that is parts delivery. You know, even in the COVID world that we're in today, we're seeing on the streets of America, you know, exploration into, you know, the Uber Eats type model of delivery, unmanned, you know, going from restaurants to individuals. We foresee that is a future, not only for our installations, but for our battlefield of the future. And so that is exactly the types of things that we're looking to explore here at the 5G Living Lab. And what's great about the OUSD effort with the smart warehouses is that would become the focal point, you know, the hub, if you will, for how we do unmanned delivery into the future. And again, we'll have a couple programs talking about that later in the panel. I wanted to again give you an opportunity. I obviously shared what, you know, I'm excited and passionate about with 5G enabled tech there. What are you most excited about as you look into the future, whether it's on a base or whether it's on the future battlefield? You know, I tell people that we missed the cellular revolution that came with 4G. You know, everyone in their homes and everyone in their, you know, commercial industry life has capitalized on the power of cellular technology and the Internet of Things to increase their production. Unfortunately, in the military, we saw 4G and cellular technology as a threat and a vulnerability to us, and we've kind of been blocked from that type of innovation. 5G is changing that game, and what it's doing for us is not only unlocking 5G and the 5G waveform and what can sit on the end of that, but really it's unlocking all of cellular technology enabled tech. And so just like 5G is built on top of a 4G network, so much more is going to come, from just more than just a 5G waveform. So for you, Joe, as you look at the future, you say you've been, I think 17 years you've been working with the Navy. What gets you most excited about this 5G enabled future?
Yeah, I would sum that up as agility, adaptation, and automation. Those are the three things. In fact, for the people watching this, I highly recommend that you go Google the term project overmatch that CNO just recently talked about. So SecDef and CNO just recently talked about having a 500 ship Navy. That's a long way from where we are today. And that 500 ship Navy is not going to be 500 aircraft carriers. A lot of those ships are going to have a high degree of autonomy. And those ships are going to be all over the world. They're not going to be in some safe harbor in San Diego or Norfolk. They're going to be everywhere in the world. So can you imagine trying to have a fully connected fleet, a globally connected fleet without 5G? I can't. I just can't imagine doing something like that. So we've got a number of lessons learned, including the 4G, where there were some prototypes. There were some people looking at, hey, how can we improve a specific use case with 4G? And there were some successes and there were some lessons learned. But that groundswell of the leadership support just wasn't there for 4G like it is now for 5G. I think 4G had that impact of letting us know there was something more possible than what we were going to be able to develop on our own. And when 5G came around, 4G had already had us thinking about that for long enough that we were ready to really act on it.
No, that's great, Joe. Joe, I wanted to thank you for joining us today. We're obviously hosting this all over the country. Some of us are out of San Diego. We first envisioned this as a actual live event here in Miramar, where we were going to bring, the leadership from Office of Secretary of Defense and across the Department of Defense and from industry all together. As we've pivoted to this virtual event, it's critical, that we kind of bridge the divide that's from the, both sides of the country here and really represent that all of the DoD is moving towards a similar, vision of the future, and that industry and opportunities like this is so critical. So Joe, I want to thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciated being here.
That's great. All right, for the audience, we're going to transition over to a panel to talk more about the 5G Living Lab and some of the things we're doing on it. I've mentioned earlier the 4 pillars of exploration that we've built around the 5G Living Lab of energy communications, connected vehicles, drones, and the digital fortress. So today we wanted to highlight some of the work that's being done over this year with, as I mentioned, the 7 pilots that we have lined up, some of which have started. So to do that, I've asked to join me from Robotic Research, a long, collaborative partner of ours out of Maryland, Eddie Motter. I've also asked to join Declan Lynch from Anduril Industries, who will talk more about security capabilities that they're working on with us. And then also we have from Amazon Web Services, we have Rich Julian, who will talk more about, cloud and how cloud overlaps with 5G into the future. And so I want to thank the 3 of you for joining me today. So first up, we're going to go to Robotic Research and Eddie Motter to talk about some of the things we're doing in unmanned systems. I've known Robotic Research and Eddie for 3 or 4 years now. They were first funded by the Office of Secretary of Defense to support us as our unmanned systems owner's engineer. What that means is they were the subject matter experts pulling on their 20 years of experience of doing both air and ground unmanned systems in industry and in defense to help us understand how we should safely set up our autonomous vehicle proving grounds. And with that, we started to open the lines of communication about what was possible into the future. Today, Robotic Research works with us on a couple different programs that's leveraging, again, their skill, but also their development in engineering and prototyping. And so it's a pleasure to have Eddie Modern with me today. How are you, Eddie?
There we go. Doing well, Brandon. I heard your intro earlier. I appreciate it. To echo his sentiments, robotic research had never performed in an owner's engineer role before. So it was interesting to get to see things from the other side, meaning that going out to experiments, looking at new technologies, going with Brandon to Qualcomm to really try to take some of the stuff that's been presented, from a technical standpoint, and make sure that I can understand it, work with my engineers, and then be able to talk with Brandon and discuss it in non-technical ways. So hopefully that's something we've been able to contribute over the year, and I believe we have, because we've been able to build on a lot of the things that happened back in 29 Palms and things that happened in when we were more in an engineering support role or owner's engineering role.
No, that's great, Eddie. I wanted to really open up the conversation and kind of bring in the audience to our ongoing conversation over the last 3 or 4 years as to where the unmanned systems markets are going. Obviously, I walked in, hearing a lot about autonomy, from Tesla on, 3 years ago. And so what is when you have a long history of doing unmanned systems for defense, can you give us a couple of examples of what robotic research has built and really scaled, maybe one in the defense sector and one in the commercial market as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So logistics, right? That's a big part of this. One of the projects that we have for the Department of Defense under the Army is autonomous ground resupply. And what that project is, we are automating the logistical convoys, PLS trucks for the Army. This came out of a need from back in the previous wars, where our logistics supplies were consistently targeted as easy targets, right? They're slower moving vehicles. You're usually creating a lot of dust when you're driving around areas in the Middle East like that. And what it came to is it became a very dangerous job. So one thing that the Army was tasked with years ago, I'm talking back since the late 2000s, early 2010, 11, was developing these systems that were going to remove the soldier out of harm's way. So in 2015, we bid on one of the projects, which is autonomous ground resupply. We're able to win that. And cut to the chase on this. So where we are now with that project, we've delivered 80 fully autonomous trucks to Fort Polk. They're going through testing right now. We have another 20 at ATEC going through safety testing. We've got approval to remove the drivers or the safety operators from the vehicle. So these convoys are operating with no one on board. And this is technology that we've been able to build over the last, building on what we've been doing for the last 20 years, but really exploiting over the last 5. And later in discussions, I'll explain how being connected is absolutely critical for being able to pull off a lot of these more advanced logistical type maneuvers. From the commercial side, we have a partnership with Local Motors. It's a company that does a lot of things, but one of the things they do is they build a low-speed shuttle called Ollie. And we've been able to deploy Ollie all around the world. And again, that's going to come more into this connected and how we handle that data globally. We'll get into a little bit more of that later, but that's one of the things we've been doing. So we're deployed currently in 14 cities around the globe, 4 continents, and all that has to be synced, and all that has to be. Well, I don't want to steal the thunder from the later part of this panel, but those are 2 very strong lines of effort that we have going based off of logistics. Some moving material, some moving people.
No, that's great, Eddie. That really triggers, our next question, which is what you're doing with us here at the 5G Living Lab and the Marine Corps and the Navy here for the SoCal Tech Bridge. You know, first I wanted to touch on that low-speed shuttle since you just brought it up, the Locomotors Ollie. You know, as you know, we have 2 Ollies on the base today, ready to go for a pilot that will be kicking off at the beginning of December. Originally, we brought these autonomous, shuttles onto the base that were going to move people, so help Marines in their commute from the barracks to the flight line as they work each day. But as things changed with COVID and delays incurred, we decided to pivot to parts delivery. I mentioned earlier in my interview with Joe Snively how we were excited about their smart warehousing effort because we were ready with unmanned systems to help move parts delivery. How about you talk just a little bit about the Ollie 1.0s and robotic research's autonomy on that, and then how it's changing into 2.0s in the future, a more capable capability.
Okay, so Ollie 1.0 was the first Ollie shuttle, or the first production version of the Ollie shuttle made by Locomotors. It had some vehicle level limitations on speed and power. It was basically one of the first shuttles to be put on the market, so it needed some upgrading on the power side of it. But from a autonomy standpoint, it took adapting what we had done for the Army. If anybody's here is familiar with Fort Bragg, they have the Center of Excellence for Traumatic Brain Injuries. And one of the projects that we did that kicked off Ollie, and it's important to kind of understand where this came from, is that we were operating autonomous shuttles at Fort Bragg back in 2014, and they were autonomously taking soldiers from the Wounded Warrior Transition Battalion to the hospital and then to surrounding areas. And so that allowed us to develop some of that technology that was going to be needed more in an urban type environment. So that kicked off a lot of the development that we were able to do for Locomotors, but that first vehicle was really our first time at trying to take a vehicle of that size and get it working in an urban environment for the sole purpose of moving pedestrians around. So it has your normal sensors, collection of LiDAR, radar, cameras, sufficient processing capability. But one of the things that's going to become very apparent in the need that this 5G Living Lab is going to help us exploit is that there's also a lot of data that's generated on this vehicle, and this data has to be stored, but it also has to be propagated. Pull the data off the vehicle, and I'll get into that in a little bit, or maybe a little bit later.
Well, Eddie, that's a great. Before I move on to Declan, as we go across the panel, for the audience, we'll come back around at least 2 rounds with each of our panelists. But when we come back to Eddie, we're going to talk more about some of the unmanned logistics systems that we're doing with Eddie and robotic research. For this, what you highlighted with the Ollie, one of our goals with the pilot, we mentioned it was an autonomous vehicle, not a connected vehicle. That means the brains and the sensors are all on board. But each night you have to move terabytes of data off that platform, 1, for post-processing, but 2, so that you could clear the space on that vehicle. So what we're trying to do with the 5G Living Lab under this pilot is really use 5G to link back to the cloud, to move that data and clear it off the vehicle itself. And that'll tie more into what we talked to Eddie about, and even what we talked to Rich about with AWS later. So as we move along our panel, thank you, Eddie, we'll move to Declan Lynch from Anduril. Declan is joining us as being a strategic partner with Anduril over the last couple of years. I first became familiar with Anduril and their capabilities as I was invited 2 years ago to join Customs and Border Protection about 2 hours east of San Diego on the southern border. They were in a prototyping and evaluation effort with Anduril to really unlock artificial intelligence, machine learning, sensor suites, and computing on the edge, all tied into cellular technology at the time. That led us to then develop a couple of different opportunities to work with Anduril and Customs and Border Protection over the last couple of years. Today, Anduril has towers that do that same capability for perimeter counter intrusion, as we call it, both at Marine Corps Air Station Yuma in Arizona, and recently here on the 5G Living Lab at Marine Corps Air Station Miramar. So Declan, how are you today?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's awesome to have you on the panel. Again, one of the virtues of a virtual event, we get to tie into you as you're back in DC today. So we're excited to let the audience in on more as to what Anduril's capabilities are. So can you tell us more about, starting with that reference point of what you do for Customs and Border Protection, what you're doing for our 2 Marine Corps air stations that I mentioned earlier? Just explain a little bit of the capability.
Yeah, absolutely. And greetings from, good afternoon from the East Coast. So maybe a good way of introduction is describing a little bit about who we are at Anduril. So we're a defense and security technology company. We're a startup. We just celebrated our 3rd year anniversary. So we're very much in the mold of some of the folks who'll be pitching this afternoon. And at our core, we're a software first company. We do develop hardware systems as well, but with a software first approach, really with the intent of being able to use AI, computer vision, mesh networking to tackle some of the biggest challenges from installation-based defense and an expeditionary force protection point of view. And so within the installation-based defense realm, we think about it from a critical infrastructure protection and a perimeter security point of view. And it's really in that mold where we're supporting you, Lieutenant Colonel Newell, and the additional air stations across the Marine Corps, where we have 2 of our hardware towers, positioned across perimeter security and that critical infrastructure protection point of view. Our hardware is an integrated platform with radar and optics. So it's a persistent autonomous surveillance where, similar to other capabilities, we have a slew to queue capability where the radar has a detection, identifies an object of interest, and the optic, the EO or IR optic, is able to interrogate that object of interest. And one of the things that's unique about our solution is our AI capability that is pushed out to the edge. So the compute capability is on the tower, able to operate in a communication denied or contested environment. And on the tower, we're then able to identify, classify, and alert the user only to those things, those objects of interest. So birds are not identified and alerted to the user, but drones and ground vehicles, surface vehicles are. Really the intent being able to leverage AI to reduce the cognitive load on the operator and alert only those things that require action. And so it's in that capacity that we've been working and partnering with you and the PMO office across Marine Corps installations.
No, that's great, Declan. I want to understand a little bit more about, from the design side, as Anduril started to design these systems that would go across the nation for different applications, and ultimately we know across the world, it came to rely on a ubiquitous cellular network. Not always great, because as I mentioned earlier, out 2 hours in rugged terrain east of San Diego is not the most built up region. But it came to rely on cellular technology as a link back into the cloud, as well as a link to the end user, right? Whether it's an agent or whether it's the security for the military and how they receive the information on their smartphone. So can you talk to us a little bit about the power of cellular technology in how you develop this and how you leverage it for those 2 applications?
Yeah, no, it's an excellent question. And, the mission set that we've designed our technology against really has to be first and foremost capable of processing and executing this, the compute capability at the edge. And we do rely on the communication infrastructure to push that data to the cloud in order to create the user interface for the operator to be able to make decisions. And so we rely on the infrastructure that's in place. And when we have the ability to reinforce that, like you mentioned earlier on the autonomous vehicles, where we were able to use the 5G capability, that will reduce the enhanced capability, reduce latency, is going to allow us to bring more sensors into that Fuse platform. So whereas right now we use only those that are integrated on our hardware, as we think about the living lab, more and more third-party and existing sensors will be able to put fused into that platform to enhance the site picture for integrated base defense and operations.
No, that's excellent, Declan. Before we transition to Rich Julian at Amazon Web Services, I just wanted to point out, this is the spirit with which we set up the 5G Living Lab. This is the spirit with which we stood up this Pitch Fest. It was really about understanding a 5G network, not from the inside, right? Not from a requirements development and towers and nodes and waveforms, but what is that 5G network trying to do for you? What is the enabled technology that will be counting on that? One of the things that we've really highlighted is that the power of cellular technology, every portfolio manager in the Navy and Marine Corps should be screaming for that to really unleash the productivity of what their capabilities do, of what their mission sets are. And so we really want to bridge the divide in how we, bring our strategic partners in to talk about what cellular technology looks like from their end as to actually doing a warfighting function of moving logistics or of security. And so it's very exciting for us to have this panel today. As we bring in Rich Julian from Amazon Web Services, we wanted to look at it from another angle. We want to look at it from how does 5G enable cloud computing and computing on the edge? Again, another incredible enabling capability that's emerged over the last, say 10 years, but it's an enabling capability meant to, increase the productivity and capability of so many functions. And so with that, I wanted Rich to talk some about, some of the objectives for where Amazon Web Services is taking things as they look at 5G.
Yeah, definitely, Brandon. I mean, AWS sees the cloud, just like you said, as an enabler for unmanned systems at the edge and beyond. And these systems in return are driving our need to push the cloud out to the edge and get it out to where it needs to be. 5G is multiplying the available data exponentially. So how do you move that data back into the stack, back further into the cloud so you can process it? The newest generation of sensors is collecting far more data than has ever been possible before. Sensors are sometimes capturing a range of data more than they were anticipated to. That data up until now has been purged or dropped because either lack of bandwidth or lack of storage. But emergent high-speed comms allow you to offload that data before it overwhelms the local storage capability and to push it back. So let's postulate that all that data collected is valuable. Maybe not right upon collection, perhaps for training, perhaps ancillary processing or analytics, or perhaps for an orthogonal usage. You never know if the temperature, pressure, and vibration you picked up on a sensor might be really important to somebody. So how do we handle this avalanche of data? AWS sees this as providing a spectrum of options that fit at the different levels that you engage with it. First, you handle it at the device or the device cluster. Think the vehicle in the case of your autonomous or disconnected vehicles. This is as close to real time as you can get. You process as much as you can at the endpoint device. Amazon has a free RTOS and sensor information and SDK that lets you do that. But even with that, sensors have extremely limited process and storage capacity. So you only process what you must. So you push it back just slightly, and now you take it and process it locally in your connected bubble or enclave inside the vehicle or inside a subsystem. Process what you need here, and again, pass the other data that you don't need back, or pass all the data if you're capable of doing it so you can use it for historic analysis. We have the ability through Amazon's Greengrass to extend the services onto the device so that they can locally process data and then connect when they have the communications. But the reality is you're still highly limited in the processing and storage available here. So you need to pass it further back the chain. So now you pass it back into the 5G network. You get it to the edge cloud, if you will. You're in the realm of very low or ultra low latency world. Here's where you begin to take advantage of the offboard processing capabilities available in the 5G network or in the connected cloud. You can scale the processing on demand, store far more, but it's still not your massive data lakes or deep analytics that you can do on the core cloud, if you will. So we've created what we call AWS Wavelength to deliver ultra low latency applications within the communication service network provider. Just happens that Verizon is our partner here in the US for delivering it. It is basically an AWS zone inside the 5G network carrier data center that provides actual AWS compute, storage, and network infrastructure with the same interfaces and controls. Developers don't want to have to build different things. They want to build it once and deploy it multiple times. And like the cloud, it needs to be on demand and scalable. We have a spectrum of services that can support at this level too. Through our IoT core, or from a security and device management perspective, we have device defenders and tools that will fit there. From here, you can pass it back through dedicated connections to the core cloud and take advantage of the full scope and scale of the cloud. Data lakes to store and combine vast amounts of data, historic data, and do AI, ML, and deep analytics against that. You can process it where and when latency is not a concern. You can blend it with other data as required. But what do you do when you have no connectivity, even from 5G? So we've created the ability to help you extend you beyond the edge or into communications restricted or inhibited areas with our Snowball family, designed for partially or fully disconnected and secure edge computing, do the collection, processing, and data movement. And we have two different flavors of it. One that's purely from a storage perspective, where you can just store the data until you can offload it. And another one where you can do some processing on the edge of it. That's our Snowball Edge Compute Optimized. You can even get a GPU built into it. And our latest offering, which is great for some of the people who will be doing smaller vehicles that are out there, we call Snowcone, because of course it had to be in part of the Snow family, which is less than 5 pounds, but allows you to do the storage in a battery managed environment. So it weighs less than 5 pounds, it's portable and embeddable into your vehicles. But let's push even further out than the edge that we can take for the disconnected edge. What if your only option is SATCOM? With the huge explosion in commercial constellations today, and with more and more coming online in the very near future, it's becoming even more viable, not only from a communications perspective, that your communications can be continuous and uninterrupted, or as close to uninterrupted as possible, but also the prices are getting to the point where it's actually realistic. So Amazon has started to push out into that area with a ground station capability to let you communicate from that. Our ground stations, somebody recognized that Amazon data centers are fixed locations with lots of ping, power, and pipe. Put a satellite dish there and you have a great ground station capacity. So we've created that, and like everything else, it's a pay-as-you-go. So again, you're using cloud for what it does. Deliver you the services when you need them and for what you need them for. We see it as providing a spectrum of offerings that allow these unmanned systems to be more closely connected from the real-time, near real-time, all the way back to historic analysis. We don't know which ones are of relevance or importance
Hey, Rich,
to
I
any
got a
given
question.
mission. Sure. Hit me.
Sorry about that. So we introduced Declan and Andrew earlier. They really focused on doing computing on the edge themselves, right? Because they knew that they needed to reduce their bandwidth requirements and only move out to the cloud those, the data and the information that was critical. And so they knew the importance of doing computing on the edge. How can you give an example of how AWS is working with companies like Andrew to really lessen the burden on them as to how they do this?
Yeah, so companies like Anduril that are putting these communications on are able to leverage pieces and parts of this. If you think of what we offer in terms of services, they're components that you plug into a mission that makes sense to you. So if you only want to offload part of the capabilities, maybe you push off historic data or vehicle data that's not necessary for the actual operation of the data, but you want to maintain it for a period over time. So they can work and deliver and push off only those pieces of the data that are not necessary for the operations that they're running at the moment. So they make the determination from a mission perspective of what they need on the device and what they don't need on the device. And then they're able to push that piece back. And then we can plug it in depending on where up the spectrum they need from it. And because these are a collection of tools, it's a two-way street, right? The comms go both ways. So they can push the data off, do the processing off, and then push insights or information or direction and dictation to the devices forward from their core pieces they're processing. The faster they can process it closer to the device, the faster they can update the decision or direction they need to provide to the platform.
Oh, that's excellent. Well, thanks, Rich. We're going to come back to you as we come around the panel again and hear more from AWS. We're going to come back to Eddie with robotic research now to talk a little more about connected vehicles. We talked earlier about the Locomotors Ollie and how it's an autonomous vehicle. So the eyes and the brains are all on board. What we see is a real unlock moving into the future with connected, and 5G is integral. 5G is going to enable connected vehicles, which mean vehicle to vehicle communications, vehicle to infrastructure, and vehicle to even my cell phone as I'm a pedestrian walking across the crosswalk in front of it. And that's a real unlock as you try to compete, with the power of the human brain that's a driver today. When you can get the eyes and some of the brains off, as Rich was talking about, off the vehicles, you really, exponentially increase the capability of these future connected vehicles. And so with that, Eddie, I thought you would talk to us a little bit about what we're doing with unmanned logistics systems. So in July, we actually demonstrated an awesome capability that took some of your other unmanned systems for other missions and prototyped a teaming capability with both drones and unmanned ground vehicle, all tied together over a 4G LTE closed network. Can you talk to us a little bit about what Robotic Research prototyped at that event?
Absolutely. I think I need to give a little context here. So being in the autonomy space personally for just over 19 years, and my founder of our company doing it way before it was cool, technically doing the first autonomous ground programs with the military before GPS was available. Connectivity has always been an issue, and it's always something that we've had to take into strong consideration. A lot of the deployments we've had over the years, specifically in the military domain, we've had to use existing infrastructure, stand up our own networks, right? 15 years ago, net mesh networks were the big thing that was coming out, being able to seamlessly add yourself to a network and pull yourself from the network without any degradation of what's going on, just seamless moving in and out of it. But that's expensive, and you're limited by range, the amount of radios you have, things of that nature. So we have a lot of technology in collaboration. That's how a lot of our systems, they need to be able to collaborate in order to share information. But what we did in this last project in July, this was the first time we used non-tactical radios to be able to have all the vehicles communicate in this collective. So for instance, we had a soldier that was running around that has an INS system on him, what we call Warlock. But instead of it feeding through the tactical radio, it was feeding through a 4G LTE modem. All the vehicles that we had, the aerial birds, we removed their radios and installed these 4G radio nodes. And then we had a radio tower set up, and then our ground vehicles also had them. So what we essentially did was we replaced all the tactical radios, which had much higher throughput, and I'll get to that in a second, and then have this all operate on a self-contained 4G LTE network. Basically, we stood up our own internal network with, we had our special SIM cards for each one of the devices, and we were able to communicate as we did with our tactical radios, but using this, civilian developed technology. For us, that's incredibly important because we deploy all over the world, and we're not going to be able to have, especially in our commercial deployments, we're not going to be able to have that reach back unless we're going through networks that are provided globally, which are not the ones that you're operating on the military side. So it's really opened our eyes to a lot of the things that are coming down the pipe. And you've, Rich alluded to some of them earlier. You're generating a tremendous amount of data on these vehicles. And when I say tremendous, on Ollie, we're generating about 3 terabytes a day and data collected. And the reason why is you have a ton of, we collect all the unprocessed raw data from the LiDAR, radars, cameras taking up the majority of that data. We record all the processed data, and then we record imagery all from around the vehicle, and all of that's time synced. And eventually that has to get uploaded to the cloud. And I'll touch on that in a minute, but back to the experiment that we did in July. We were able to show that with some manipulation of the data packets that we had to pass because our bandwidth was more limited on these type of radios, that we were still able to have a complete demonstration sharing all the pertinent information using a 4G LTE setup. And what makes me really excited about that is the possibility of being able to get the lower latencies and throughput of doing this in a 5G paradigm. Now I'm speaking specifically on the military side. I see that happening faster on the commercial side just due to the nature of a lot of the cities that we're deploying in that actually have 5G up and running now.
Yeah, Eddie, let me paint a picture for the audience a little bit more about what we demonstrated together in July and where that program's going. So this is a program about unmanned logistics systems. So you may have heard of, think Uber and, think FedEx and UPS, moving their delivery trucks out into your neighborhood and then launching drones to bring assets to your front door, individual packages. So we took what we learned through some of our strategic relationships in industry and tried to show how that would be changing how we do logistics on the battlefield in the future. This effort that we did with Eddie and what we demonstrated in year 1 in July was the initial prototype of that capability. So we took a ground unmanned vehicle, we launched it to deliver a resupply to a remote location. At the same time, that ground vehicle had 2 drones on it. One drone takes off and becomes the eyes in the sky for the vehicle. So the teaming between the first drone and the ground vehicle are adding together to make the mapping required for the navigation of the ground vehicle to conduct this mission. The second drone then takes off and is actually carrying a battery and is going to another location, a remote location, a secondary location to deliver a battery. So what we achieved on this 4G LTE network was the teaming of 3 different assets into what I call a multifaceted resupply mission. And we had a great benefit of bringing in Moto AI, who's actually a Qualcomm spinout. Qualcomm and all of their work they were doing for cellular control of drones has a contract with the Defense Innovation Unit to develop these base stations and the antenna, the receivers that would then go onto assets. So we were able to include those assets into robotic research's systems and actually create this closed network LTE. Now we're moving on into year 2. Now that we've collected the information and we've opened up the aperture by showing both industry and warfighters how this capability is coming about in the design think session that followed the actual demonstration itself. And then we've taken that feedback into our iterative design model. And now we're working with robotic research as to where we bring that capability next. So next May, here at Miramar on the 5G Living Lab, we will have the next round of that prototype with greater advancements in each system coming and doing a more advanced resupply method, all tied back into the 5G network in some way. Now, how we do that and how we rely upon 5G and the cellular network is what we're figuring out in the iterative design. So Eddie, can you talk a little bit more about what you're excited about as we go into year 2 of that project?
We'd be here all day if I talked about all the things I'm excited about coming up for May. But one of the things that's very interesting to us right now, as I mentioned before, the commercial vehicles that we've deployed all over the world are generating around 3 terabytes per day per vehicle, and we have to do something with that data. And right now, when we were developing the system years ago, we had our high throughput military style radios on the vehicle. So pulling data off wirelessly wasn't the biggest deal in the world because we would do it overnight. But so where we are now, especially with vehicles all around the globe, where when we have an Ollie go to the depot in the evening, an individual has to go over to the vehicle, pull out the drive, put it into an uploader, and it gets uploaded to the cloud, even to AWS. We're very familiar. We upload a lot of our data to AWS so that our customers can get access to it as well. But that takes time, and it takes it takes you remembering to do it every single day, and you don't want to lose data. And I'll get into that in a second. So one of the things that 5G is going to offer right off the bat is just the ability to be offloading that data while the vehicle's running during the day. So you're not getting into issues where you have to stop the vehicle because you've reached the limit, which you can fix that with hard drives. But what it allows us to do is pull that data off in real time, and if there are things in that data as we're pulling it off, we can actually run on that raw data. We can run that through other algorithms that we have back at our facility to see if there's a different outcome, for the same situation that the vehicle just went through, as opposed to waiting for the end of the night, be able to pull that off. So it offers us that flexibility. It also offers us the automatic portion of it, where the vehicle knows when it pulls into the depot. There no longer has to be human interaction. oh, I'm back for the night. Time to start uploading the video. It's time to start uploading the data. That's one of the things that we're very, it's going to be, that we're greatly looking forward to. Another one is pulling the video off real time. So right now, at most of the deployments, there's a 1-to-1. We have one safety operator per vehicle. And the next phase we're going to is going to be 1 to many vehicles. In order to facilitate that, you have to have a relatively high throughput, very low latency link. And we've been able to mitigate that using special techniques with the military radios and other things. But what 5G promises is that throughput with that deterministic low latency, so that we were able to take control and we're able to do things with the vehicle remotely that aren't currently feasible. And that's also a big plus for us. And we'll be looking at that during the May demonstration as well.
So Eddie, you're reminding me of a couple years ago, with robotic research's long history of developing, tactical unmanned systems for the battlefield, and knowing, the reliability that you have to have on a network that you would stand up, and then having to develop for GPS denied environments. I remember, somewhat of your skepticism about cellular technology filling that void. And then you and I went together in the early days of our relationship with Qualcomm, and they really showed us where the future was going with their CV2X program, their connected vehicle 2X to everything, as I mentioned earlier, and how 5G was going to be integral to that. That really speaks to the power of these collaborative markets we build around, with industry to kind of break down the barriers between government and industry, and really the, market makers, if you will. And so talk to us a little bit more about, how Qualcomm's insight into where connected vehicles were going and the 5G networks were going, and how, you kind of grew in confidence as to how the future might be well suited for what you do.
Yeah, well, thanks for that. And you have to realize, being in the technical space, you hear a lot of things, right? You hear a lot of things that are going to be coming out, and new technologies that are emerging, but until you test them and you get your hands on them, you can, sometimes you have to take what you hear with a grain of salt. And we weren't, based on a lot of tests we've been doing for many years on cellular technology, it wasn't appropriate for a lot of things that we did. But sitting and going through that unlocked a lot of key things. And this, and Rich keyed on this earlier when he talks about edge computing. So one thing that 5G is going to enable, that we think is going to be absolutely paramount and huge, is that it can reduce the amount of processing and capability needed at the platform. And that can be hosted at the edge in the cloud, so that you don't have to have the $150,000 autonomy package on the commercial vehicle. You can greatly reduce that because you can do a lot of the processing off board, because it can be done in virtual real time. And then what you do is you just ensure the remaining systems on the vehicle are safety critical systems, haven't been manipulated, and that there is enough processing and sensing capability still inherent that if it does lose connectivity for some reason, if it's jammed, a tower goes down, et cetera, that it can still maintain some safe maneuvers until that network is available again. That was one of the big ones. And the other one that it unlocked is, back then I didn't understand the 5G waveform and how there are different components to it, whether it's the ultra wideband component or when your frequency is a lot lower and you're getting greater ranges. But that deterministic latency was also a very big one for us, because when you're operating vehicles remotely, just a second or say 500 milliseconds, a half a second of delay can be very detrimental if you're trying to do certain maneuvers in certain situations. So being able to get that more deterministic, knowing what that latency is, but also having the high throughput, allows us to operate these vehicles safer and at greater distances.
No, that's great, Eddie. I appreciate the relationship we've had with robotic research for many years, obviously with the autonomous vehicle proving grounds, and then some of the projects that we're doing now, all unlocking kind of the future stepping stones to enabled capability. And so in this regard, when you talk connected vehicle, we aren't sure, are we going to set up cellular networks ourselves like some of our partners are going to be doing, and what that OUSD program is about? Or are we going to, the battlefield of the future is going to have a network that we either is in a friendly nation or an unfriendly nation, so that we may have access to, or we may have to scavenge. We can't make those types of decisions on how important that future would be and how we interface with future networks unless we understand, again, how critical 5G and 4G is to a connected vehicle, to an unmanned logistics system, to a shuttle. And so what the work you've been doing with us is critical to close our knowledge gaps and our requirements gaps as we really push into a new frontier in the Marine Corps. And so I want to personally thank you.
Well, real quick, I'd like to personally thank you back, and I think a lot of people would, for giving us the opportunity to have a space, to have a living lab like this. Because without your vision, a lot of this wouldn't be possible, right? I wouldn't be here having these conversations with you. I wouldn't have sat at Qualcomm and gone through a lot of that. So the fact that you've been able to bring in so many players from the commercial industry for a common goal to help better, transition this emerging technologies into the military, I applaud you for that, and I'm glad I've been around for the ride.
Hey, I thank you for that, Eddie. On to Decker and Darrell. We talked a lot about connected vehicles just now and what the future of 5G was doing. I want to show a little bit of the complexity and diversity of things that Andarill's doing for Department of Defense now. So you're doing perimeter counter intrusion, ground perimeter, as I mentioned earlier. You're also doing counter UAS or counter drone for different offices. You have a maritime project here in San Diego, actually, where we're looking across, miles across the ocean, looking at threat vectors again. So these are 3 different threat vectors that are not typically combined in my space, right? Like these are all thought of as different portfolios. But what we're really seeing as technology transforms is that they interface in the AI. They interface with the user interface for the customer and the individual. So can you talk to us a little bit more about that capability and how Andarill tackles these different threat vectors and how they're all linked together?
Yeah, absolutely. And just to kind of echo Eddie's point there, we cannot underestimate the value of demonstrating, improving these capabilities aboard our installations. When we think about leveraging autonomous vehicles, unmanned systems, there's a lot of program offices that need to kind of see how this technology can be applied, and leveraging the Living Lab and the power and the capability that 5G offers there goes a tremendous way to bringing these technologies to the warfighter. And that is something that we should be applauding and be excited about. And to your point, we think about multi-domain sensing as being kind of the next wave where emerging technologies and AI can really bring value to the warfighter. Rich made a point earlier about kind of the value and capability of new sensors that are ubiquitous on the market now. The data that they process or that they create aboard our installations. Data is king, and when we're thinking about how to train and inform our systems, improve the AI algorithms, improve the computer vision capabilities. What we learned from our domestic and critical infrastructure, perimeter security protection capabilities aboard Marine Corps installations has immediate direct application to supporting the warfighter on an ATOL and an expeditionary advanced base point of view. And so we think about counter intrusion in that regard. Multimodal, thinking about sensing against maritime threat, against counter UAS and air threat. And in the air domain, you've got not only drones, group 1, 2, and 3 drones, but also reaching up to the cruise missile capabilities. And we've designed our hardware solutions with that software first point of view. So as you think about what you're trying to get enhanced awareness of on the battle space, it really is a matter of integrating the right sensors. And so in that regard, we think about putting all of those together from a counter intrusion and an expeditionary force protection point of view. And the advancement in our technology capabilities, the ability to leverage AI turns that model from a one operator to a one sensor, one device into a one to many. And we think that's going to really have a tremendous impact on the capabilities of the warfighter.
Can you paint a picture about the end user, I know that whether it's the military police or the agent, they are able to see your tracks, who the system is tracking and keeping track of them, and what their vulnerabilities are on their smartphones. Obviously, that's leveraging the cellular technology that's there today. Can you paint a picture for us about how that works?
Yeah, well, so when you think about force protection, either in any domain, whether it's downrange in an operational environment or aboard an installation, you've got Marines or law enforcement personnel who are trying to increase our situational awareness of the environment, and we have the ability to leverage sensors wherever they are to enhance that site picture. And so what our technology does is it integrates all of those available sensor feeds into one platform. It reduces all of the noise, and it only alerts those things that are of an interest to the warfighter or to the installation defender. And so in your operating center, you are able to distill all that noise and only be alerted to the things that impact your mission. And what we've designed allowed us to be able to do, which is our sensor fusion platform, is that end-to-end process. So on the edge, processing, doing the sensor fusion on the edge, pulling it all into the cloud, being able to use that platform to also push information to the warfighter. So if it's a law enforcement officer, whether it be pushed via ATAC or direct to a mobile device, they can get a screenshot or pulling up the platform on their mobile device, actually be able to walk onto the target, whether it's a drone or a person, or a specific object of interest. They can see the image, they can track the object over the time that the detection has been made. And instead of patrolling large open areas, they're able to make on-site specific point interdictions. And so it really leverages our warfighter, our greatest asset, on the specific things that they have to do, and less on the streaming and the evaluation of ends and ends of data.
Yeah, and so we didn't talk about this question previously, but Andrew is a great example of a dual-use technology company because of the background of your founder and so many folks that are in your company today. And famously, Palmer Luckey, has really written some articles talking about bringing the power of Silicon Valley to the defense sector. You want to talk about that a little bit, about why it's so important to unlock the incredible entrepreneurial spirit and advancement that Silicon Valley and others is leading in this country into the defense sector?
Yeah, well, so I think Silicon Valley has a reputation of late of not participating and working in the national security space, and while that may be true for some of the large technology companies, there are a huge number of engineers who are motivated and inclined to support missions of national security. And so we've got to position ourselves as being the place where those young engineers coming from places like Google and SpaceX and Tesla can really focus on national security missions. And one part of our value prop as a company to those talented engineers is that we're going to use more of our independent research and development dollars to try and anticipate what the services need from a requirements perspective. And so we're taking on a little bit of that risk, designing our capabilities, and then working with folks like yourself to actually demonstrate the capabilities as they exist. And then the second most important part is mapping them to actual department requirements. And so it's that kind of value prop where we think we're able to bring a lot of talent focused on autonomy, bringing autonomy and AI to emerging technologies to solve like legitimate challenges that the DoD faces, and the Commandant in particular, as he looks at force design for 2030.
Oh, that's awesome, Declan. Thanks for sharing that. I'd like to come to Rich now, again, with Amazon Web Services. I've got two questions together for you, Rich, and maybe you can explore it. Just like the question I had for Declan, I believe Jeff Bezos has been very vocal about his support to, working with the government, and that, and I think the role that you play at AWS is actually, bridges that divide very effectively. So maybe you have a comment or two about that, as you also paint a picture as to what's the most exciting for you as you look at the future of 5G and what it unlocks with AWS.
Yeah, so as a person who came out of the military and national security world, I've always had a desire to continue to work back in the space and bring more technology back into it for the warfighter, to try to accomplish missions, to protect our country, and to keep soldiers safe. But I'd also like to flip it on its head a little bit. Some of the incredible ideas that warfighters come up with, because protecting their own skin is so important to them, is also massively transferable back to the commercial community. There are so many incredible ideas we've seen in working with the various defense innovation organizations that have come from the soldiers, sailors, and airmen that have commercial applicability as well. They thought about it from the perspective of accomplishing their mission, but we see that there's a lot of feedback from to the Silicon Valley from the warfighters too. I think that from a looking to the future, the best part of doing the job I do, which is doing venture and startups for AWS, is I have no clue what the next emerging technologies that are really cool are going to be. But the entrepreneurs and founders that I work with, they do. Whether it's an Anduril that comes up here or robotics research and stuff, they'll come up with a technology that will shock us. Whether it's doing warfighter risk reduction or commercial autonomous vehicles, smart city technologies, sustainability, some of these next technologies will come out and will have real impact to us. And from AWS's perspective, we'll just keep delivering more capabilities to enable that. But my personal vision I'd like to see in this, and something that I'm working with as part of our new organization for aerospace and satellites, is manned space missions in off-Earth environments. Whether they're space stations or establishing colonies forward in the moon and Mars as we look forward to the future, of a large participation within that will be autonomous in nature and with limited or no human involvement. And just like the original space missions, I believe the military will have a huge part to play in that, because the way that you think about risk and about programs sends itself and lends itself so well to that.
I think that's a great picture you paint about space, and I liken it to the way I think of defense today, right? Like these companies, whether it's Anduril or robotic research, or whether it's our 10 companies that are pitching today, the sooner they get to market, in a commercial market even, the sooner we as a nation realize on their vision, right? And I think there's a public-private opportunity here with forums like this to really move it forward. And, we're so glad that Verizon Ventures and Qualcomm Ventures are here with us, as well as AWS, to help us set up these types of events. I think for space, it's the same thing, right? The sooner we can realize upon the potential of 5G and get the policy barriers out of the way and get the vulnerability barriers to be understood, you see an unlock into the future of your space applications as well. But we first have to realize it in that commercial market. So with that, I wanted to then, come to my last question for you, Rich. Anduril and Robotic Research are kind of strategic partners with us. They are demonstrating their capabilities on our 5G Living Lab through other contracts that we have, with them, the DoD. But we need to actually do it here on the 5G Living Lab. We need to see how it interfaces with Verizon's 5G network. We need to understand how important that network and what are the critical capabilities of the network to support the capabilities that Robotic Research and Anduril develop, right? And then we need to be able to see how our warfighters use those assets, how they leverage it, how do they move parts on a delivery, how do they interface with a security system to increase their own situational awareness and close in some of their gaps. So to that end, just like what Robotic Research and Anduril is doing with us, we are thrilled to have these 10 companies here today that are competing for the opportunity, not only to get a cash prize, but to come back in February and actually demonstrate on the 5G Living Lab what their capability does. Now, upon being selected today as the 4 winners, they'll instantly start working with Verizon and our project manager for the 5G Living Lab, US Ignite, a nonprofit, to develop their demonstration, like figure out how we're going to effectively demonstrate, on the 5G network in conjunction with Verizon's network. To that end, Amazon Web Services has an announcement that I'm excited for Rich to make.
Thanks. I really appreciate it, Brandon. You know, AWS thinks this is a fantastic opportunity that is pushing the envelope of what is possible, and is in direct support to our military base. But it's not just that. It's also pushing the edge of what cloud needs to accomplish to deliver this. So it's providing a lot of information back to us on what the next generation of cloud capabilities we have to deliver are going to be. We're definitely excited to see this work being performed with our partners like Verizon and Qualcomm. And so we are committed to helping these demonstrations achieve success. To that end, AWS will assist the winning teams in crafting and delivering their solutions, if they're interested, by providing business, operational, and technical assistance in their efforts, including AWS credits, technical assistance with cloud architecture and implementation, and security and compliance enablement and testing. We have a long history of doing the security and compliance controls for FedRAMP or SOC and even the CMMC. And we know that's a huge challenge for a lot of commercial companies that come out. So we'd like to help with that process. We're planning to extend the support beyond just these demonstrations to helping these companies, as you said, grow and scale and become commercial entities going into this. Our support and the AWS credits are not limited to this. They will be used to help these companies achieve success moving forward. And we will continue to support these companies even after the demonstrations through our local presence in San Diego and our commitment to helping the startups succeed, not only with AWS overall, but also to plug into the wider US public sector and in particular into the national security community. We look forward to continuing our interaction with government partners like NSIN and NAVWAR and NavalX, and of course the Marine Corps. And as you mentioned, AWS is deeply committed to supporting the US national security. Jeff Bezos actually said, if you don't like it, you can find another job.
Oh, that's great, Rich. You know, we want to thank you for your involvement in this and joining us on the panel, and then that announcement of, you know, how AWS is kind of leaning into the gap for some of these companies as to unlocking the power of cloud computing and cloud services. And so, you know, through your relationship with Verizon and Verizon's network being on the base, and being our partner in the 5G Living Lab, it's an awesome way, just like how Verizon's helping these companies understand how to effectively interface with the network. AWS is going to help these companies understand how to, you know, tap into the power of the cloud through the network. And so it's an awesome thing. I want to thank you for what you're doing today. You know, we only have a few more minutes, and I wanted to just open it up for any of the panelists to, you know, kind of give some closing remarks about, you know, what you're excited about, you know, whether it's something you're doing with us or something you're doing elsewhere. Let's paint one last picture about where the future lies for you and your company moving forward. I'll start with you, Eddie.
Thanks, Brandon. So moving forward, and I want to keep it, maybe I'll do this in two different buckets. So I've already spoken a lot about what we're looking forward to in this living lab and being able to exploit 5G. I'm a Verizon customer myself. Just they enabled 5G in my area. I think it was like last week. So I'm actually getting to experience it on the handheld, which is nice. But the real thing is here is the enabler, being able to enlarge deployments at fixed sites, for instance, even military installations. The ability to communicate with low latencies and that high throughput is something that without custom radio solutions that are extremely expensive, we're really looking forward to that. And then further in the commercial realm, you know, we have projects going with, you know, we're the exclusive provider to New Flyer for autonomous technologies. They're the largest bus manufacturer in North America, and it's not even close. But the cities that we're going to be deploying in, this technology is huge because we don't have to do the infrastructure piece anymore. You know, for instance, when we were doing it in Chicago, or when we're doing it down in DC, or up in New York for the Port Authority, those projects are going to rely heavily on communications and infrastructure and being able to pull data real time, I mean real time, low latency from those sensors to the vehicles. That was another key thing that we didn't talk about earlier. It was the other panelists were able to talk about, but another huge thing that we do is we try to limit, we put as much technology on the vehicles as necessary in order to complete the job safely and to meet the requirements. But having that backup right? Having that that level of redundancy is definitely something that, you know, as a company, we're looking forward to having, and that's that computing that can take place that doesn't necessarily need to be on the vehicle, that can help augment the vehicle.
That's great, Eddie. I appreciate that. Declan, you've both worn the suit that I'm wearing and the suit you're wearing. You know, what most excites you, either from your past experience or your current, you know, role that you play in national security, about where we're going in the future?
Yeah, I will just say my third uniform as a defense tech startup guy is a hoodie, so that's my normal habitat these days. But what most excites me, and I think, you know, one of the things you've been able to cultivate here with the Living Lab is, you know, and 5G is unlocking the maximum value for our technology in particular. And more importantly than that, it's showcasing the capability that I think is helping the Marine Corps in particular think about solving multi-domain sensing and counter-intrusion problems differently. And so in that way, it's really inspiring. We're able to demonstrate technology, help the Marine Corps think about problems slightly differently, and really set the scene for bringing these capabilities to the warfighter. It's easy for me to see how the work we're doing with you and the team at the Air Station in Miramar will inform how Marines fight in an expeditionary advanced base operation concept. And that makes me very proud every single day. And it makes a lot of us here very excited about the mission that we're supporting.
That's awesome, Declan. Thank you. Rich, last question for you. You know, from your history in the service, I mean, you know how big of a bureaucracy that sits behind me. You know, it is a bureaucratic nightmare actually to change and unlock opportunity. You know, from your perch now with AWS, and as you pull on your past experience when you were in uniform, you know, what are your words of advice to us in the institution as to how we get out of our own way?
I think the advice is to do what you're doing right now, right? The creation of living labs, where you have a platform for 5G, using cloud, so there's another platform that's there that have commercial applicability, and having organizations like yours and like NSIN that are doing outreach to small businesses that are starting up that have great ideas will encourage these companies to pursue potentially working with the national security community, because they have the ability to do this dual use. They can sell commercially, they can also solve problems for the military and the national security community. And there are so many of these entrepreneurs out there that are really interested in doing that. They just don't know how. And you guys are starting to provide them the mechanism for doing that connectivity to figure out, how do I talk to the Marine Corps? The Marine Corps is a thing. How do I find someone in the Marine Corps? Because I think I have something that can help. There's organizations like yours or like NSIN that can say, you have something for the Marine Corps? I can help you get it there. And that's what's really exciting to me, is that we're seeing more and more of these new startup companies that are saying, you know what? I really can do something with the Army, with the Marine Corps, with the Navy, with the Air Force, and still make a commercial product.
Well, you know, Rich, with that, I mean, you're really speaking to the passion of, you know, what my organization's about and what Jesse's organization is about with NSIN. And so I thank you for those remarks. I want to thank Eddie, Declan, and Rich for joining us today to really give their insights into the future, both in a strategic way, but also in a tactical way as we look to the 5G Living Lab now and what we're doing with this pitch day. So thank you very much, guys.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you much.
Now, handing back over to Jesse. Really excited about the program that we've built with NSIN and where Jesse and team are going to lead us into the afternoon.
Great. Thank you, Brandon. Really appreciate your support in this event, and certainly want to thank all of our panelists and previous speakers for contributing to the conversation today. And I hope for all of you attendees, since we have a very diverse group of attendees. We've got military members from all services across the country. We've got representatives from the venture community, from startups, that hopefully this was informative for you. And we hope that you'll be sticking around this afternoon for the meat of the show, which is the pitch competition that'll be coming up at 12:40. And so we're going to take a lunch break here in just a minute. And again, I just want to say on behalf of NSIN, you know, we are a DoD organization that is, you know, looking to work smarter and faster to make sure that you and your companies have pathways into the Department of Defense. Obviously, there are a variety of unique challenges that are facing our country today, and we need the best and brightest minds in our country working on those problems. And NSIN is here to help be an advocate for you and helping to bring your technologies to bear to solve complicated and exciting problems like the many that we talked about today in the 5G space. So with that, again, thank you all for joining us for this morning session. We're going to take a break here in the afternoon. We'll be coming back at 12:40 on the dot, and then we'll be moving forward with our keynote from our NSIN Managing Director, Morgan Plummer, and we'll jump right into our 10 pitches. So thank you all for joining us for the morning session, and we look forward to seeing you after a quick lunch break here in 40 minutes. So thank you all, and we'll see you in a few minutes. Bye.